The morning air in Toledo was still, heavy with incense and the distant tolling of church bells. Inside the convent, a secret stirred, one that would shatter faith, rumor, and reason alike. A 52-year-old nun, her life dedicated to prayer, chastity, and devotion, was discovered to be pregnant. The walls of the convent, adorned with centuries of sacred art and solemn vows, seemed to tremble at the revelation. Whispers spread like wildfire. How could this happen? Some called it a miracle. Others whispered of sin, deception, or scandal. Authorities were summoned, and the city held its breath, divided between awe and disbelief. In the flickering candlelight of the chapel, shadows seemed to question the very nature of faith. Was this a divine mystery beyond understanding, or a secret that history had long tried to conceal? Imagine witnessing such an event. Would you believe in the impossible or fear it? The convent of Santa Maria la Real, perched on the ancient streets of Toledo, had long been a place of solemn devotion and whispered prayers. Its stone walls, centuries old, had borne witness to generations of nuns, their lives marked by discipline, silence, and unwavering faith. Yet on a chill morning in early spring, those walls held a secret so extraordinary that it threatened to shatter the convent's rigid order. Sister Magdalena, a nun revered for her piety and decades of unwavering service, had been discovered to be pregnant. The news spread through the convent like wildfire. Some sisters gasped in horror, their faces pale and rigid with disbelief. Others crossed themselves repeatedly, murmuring prayers of protection and forgiveness. The air was thick with the scent of incense and candle wax, mingling with the faint metallic tang of fear. The chapel, usually a sanctuary of calm, became a theater of hushed speculation. How could this happen? At 52, with decades of devotion to vows of chastity, Magdalena's pregnancy seemed impossible, an enigma that challenged the convent's very understanding of morality, biology, and divine intervention. The abbess summoned the council of sisters, their robes brushing softly against the cold stone floors. Candles flickered in the draughty halls, shadows dancing like specters along the walls, reflecting the tension in the room. Magdalena stood quietly, hands folded, eyes lowered, a serene calm that only heightened the unease around her. The sisters debated, oscillating between fear, curiosity, and reverent awe. Some whispered of a miracle, a divine sign sent to confound understanding. Others murmured doubts, their words a mixture of suspicion and disbelief. Word soon reached the secular authorities. Toledo's local magistrates were called to the convent, arriving in their heavy coats, boots clattering against cobblestones, faces etched with skepticism. Their questions were careful, probing, yet respectful of the sacred space. The nuns complied, guided by fear, duty, and an understanding that history was watching even in these small halls. And as the sun rose, casting long shafts of light through the stained glass, Sister Magdalena's secret was no longer confined to whispers. The city, cloaked in awe and suspicion, began to speculate. Was this a divine miracle, or something far more human? If you were in the convent, witnessing this impossible event, would you have accepted it as a miracle or sought the truth? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. The news of Sister Magdalena's pregnancy had traveled beyond the convent walls, carried by whispers along Toledo's narrow streets. Merchants paused mid-sale, street children stopped their games, and travelers passing through the city felt the weight of a story that defied both faith and reason. By mid-morning, the abbess had reluctantly contacted the local magistrates, men who prided themselves on logic, law, and the fragile order of the city. Their arrival at the convent was deliberate, boots echoing across the courtyard, faces a mask of professional detachment, though their eyes betrayed curiosity and disbelief. The convent doors, tall and ancient, opened to admit the magistrates. The air inside was thick, heavy with the scent of wax, incense, and a faint hint of apprehension. The nuns gathered, a silent audience, their whispers swallowed by the oppressive walls. Sister Magdalena remained calm, her posture serene, her gaze lowered, almost as if she were offering herself to judgment with quiet dignity. The magistrates spoke carefully, asking questions about timelines, physical observations, and the convent's strict adherence to its rules. Their words were precise, seeking evidence, while their minds battled the extraordinary implications of what they had been summoned to witness. Outside the convent, the story spread faster than any decree or official announcement. Citizens speculated wildly, some calling it a miracle, others whispering of scandal. Street corners became arenas of debate. Could a nun, long dedicated to vows of chastity, bear a child at 52? Was it divine intervention, a punishment, or a secret human transgression hidden under layers of devotion? Candle vendors, blacksmiths, and priests all carried fragments of the tale, embellishing details with each retelling. The city's air vibrated with tension, awe, and disbelief, as if Toledo itself were holding its breath, waiting for the resolution of an impossible story. Inside, the abbess tried to maintain control, reminding the sisters of their duty, of their obedience, yet the convent seemed to fracture under the weight of curiosity and fear. The magistrates examined the nun carefully, questioning medical details and timelines, yet no rational explanation emerged. Every answer only deepened the mystery, pushing faith and reason to the brink. The nuns watched, torn between reverence and dread, each wondering how history would remember this impossible day. As night approached, shadows grew long in the chapel, candlelight flickering across walls steeped in centuries of devotion. Toledo waited silently for an explanation that may never come. If you were part of the city that day, witnessing whispers of this miracle, would you have believed or doubted? Share your thoughts in the comments. By the afternoon, Toledo's streets buzzed with attention that blended awe, fear, and disbelief. Word of Sister Magdalena's pregnancy had reached the marketplace, the riverbanks, and even the cathedral steps, where priests debated the implications in hushed tones. Citizens gathered in small clusters, their conversations a mixture of speculation and scandal, each voice raising more questions than it answered. Could a nun so deeply committed to a life of chastity and devotion truly bear a child at 52? And if so, was it divine intervention, a punishment from God, or a transgression hidden in secrecy? The Church, unable to ignore such a disruptive and unprecedented claim, dispatched a small delegation of inquisitors to the convent. Their arrival carried solemnity, robes brushing against the worn stone floors, sandals echoing in the cloistered corridors. Their task was delicate: to investigate, discern the truth, and preserve the integrity of both the convent and faith itself. The nuns watched anxiously, some kneeling in silent prayer, others wringing their hands in fear and anticipation. The abbess, her composure tested, guided the visitors through corridors lined with centuries-old art, relics, and sacred texts, all bearing witness to centuries of devotion now shadowed by uncertainty. The inquisitors examined Magdalena carefully, their questions probing yet restrained. They asked of her daily routines, her recent movements, and her interactions with other members of the convent. Every detail was scrutinized, yet no evidence of deception emerged. Physicians consulted alongside the church delegation confirmed the impossibility, yet the pregnancy remained undeniable. In the flickering candlelight, the convent felt like a stage where reality and mystery collided. Meanwhile, outside, the city's populace grew restless. Rumors twisted the story further. Some whispered of secret liaisons, others of angels and miracles. Street preachers spoke of signs from God, cautioning followers to reflect upon faith and obedience. Merchants shared exaggerated accounts, turning the convent into the epicenter of Toledo's curiosity. The air carried both incense and tension, mingling with the faint metallic scent of the city's river, a tangible reminder that reality had shifted, even if only by rumor. As night fell, the convent doors closed, but the questions remained, heavier than the candle-lit shadows. Toledo had witnessed a disruption that no law, logic, or faith could fully explain. Sister Magdalena's secret had become a riddle for the city, the church, and history itself. If you had been in Toledo that night, standing in the shadows outside the convent, would you have believed in a miracle or feared a scandal? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. The convent, once a sanctuary of quiet devotion, had transformed into a labyrinth of fear and whispered speculation. Sister Magdalena moved among the cloistered corridors, with the weight of impossible knowledge pressing upon her. Each footstep echoed against the cold stone, each shadow seemed to observe, each flickering candle threatened to expose a secret that the world was already questioning. She had dedicated her life to prayer, to discipline, to a covenant that forbade intimacy, yet here she was, carrying life within her, an anomaly that challenged the very core of her faith. The sisters reacted in a spectrum of emotions. Some regarded Magdalena with reverence, suggesting this could be a miracle, a divine message whose meaning eluded human understanding. Others recoiled, crossing themselves repeatedly, murmuring prayers for forgiveness and protection, their eyes betraying fear and suspicion. The abbess, though composed, walked a delicate line between safeguarding the sanctity of the convent and confronting the scandal that threatened to spill into the streets. Candles burned low, the wax pooling like the heavy silence that filled the corridors. Magdalena's own thoughts were a battlefield. Was this divine intervention or an inexplicable failure of nature? Could it be both? She reflected upon decades of service, of ritual, of quiet solitude, and wondered if she had been chosen for this moment, or condemned. Every sound, the soft rustle of robes, the faint clink of keys, the whisper of a passing sister, magnified her isolation. The convent, with its centuries-old art and sacred relics, now seemed complicit in her anxiety, walls adorned with saints' faces watching judgmentally, candlelight casting their expressions into grotesque distortions. Outside the convent, Toledo's curiosity grew, but within, tension escalated subtly. Small acts of defiance and fear played out in the shadows. A sister who avoided Magdalena's gaze, another who lingered at a doorway to observe her movements, the quiet shuffle of feet and whispered prayers forming an invisible chorus of apprehension. Magdalena understood that secrecy was her shield, yet every whispered rumor, every cautious glance made the walls feel like a cage. As dusk approached, the candles guttered, casting long, trembling shadows across the stone floors. Magdalena paused in the chapel, placing her hands upon her swelling belly. The question pressed into her heart. If this is truly a miracle, why does it feel like a sentence? Would you have embraced faith or questioned every truth you had ever known? Tell me in the comments. What would you have done if you were Sister Magdalena alone with such a secret? By the following morning, Toledo was alive with speculation. Word of Sister Magdalena's pregnancy had moved from whispered conversations in the convent to the bustling streets, spilling into the marketplace, taverns, and cathedral steps. Citizens, young and old, paused mid-task to discuss the impossible. Street children, wide-eyed, repeated fragments of what they had overheard, embellishing the story with each retelling. Merchants debated whether it was a miracle or a sin, while priests hurriedly offered sermons reminding congregants of obedience, humility, and the mysteries of God. The convent, once insulated from the world, now felt the pressure of the city's scrutiny. Visitors arrived, curious nobles, cautious clergy, and even a few skeptical physicians, each demanding an audience to witness, to verify, or to condemn. The abbess tried to maintain composure, guiding them through the ornate halls, lined with centuries of sacred relics and paintings of saints, whose eyes seemed to follow every visitor, silent observers to history unfolding. The nuns shuffled quietly, eyes downcast, aware that every glance or whisper could be misinterpreted as complicity or judgment. Inside, Sister Magdalena remained calm outwardly, yet internally a storm raged. Her days had been regimented by decades of devotion, and now she was thrust into a maelstrom of scrutiny, curiosity, and disbelief. She knew the city would not accept ambiguity. Either this was divine intervention, or it was scandalous transgression. Every step she took, every prayer whispered in the chapel, carried with it the weight of expectation, fear, and judgment. Rumors spread beyond the convent gates like wildfire. Some called the pregnancy a miracle, a sign from heaven meant to inspire awe and devotion. Others whispered of deceit, secret sins hidden under the guise of piety. Posters and pamphlets circulated, discussing the event in hushed but fervent tones, transforming the quiet convent into the epicenter of Toledo's intrigue. Even outside the city, travelers carried news of the nun who defied reason and biology alike, framing it in moral, religious, and political debates. By nightfall, tension had reached a fever pitch. The convent's candles burned low, shadows twisting across stone floors like specters of fear. Sister Magdalena knelt in the chapel, hands folded over her swelling belly, reflecting on the impossible events. The question loomed, would Toledo see this as divine or condemn her as human? If you were in the city that day, witnessing the story unfold, would you have believed in a miracle or assumed the worst? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. By the third day, The church could no longer ignore the growing storm surrounding the convent. Toledo's cathedral dispatched an official delegation, a team of inquisitors and clerics, to investigate Sister Magdalena's pregnancy with meticulous precision. Their robes brushed the ancient stone floors, sandals echoing in the halls, each step carrying authority and judgment. The nuns, already tense, moved with heightened anxiety, whispering prayers that seemed swallowed by the cavernous halls. Magdalena herself maintained a serene exterior, but her heart pounded with the weight of every scrutinizing gaze. The inquisitors' questions were deliberate, probing, and unrelenting. They inquired about her daily routines, interactions with other nuns, and the management of the convent's cloistered spaces. Each query was designed to reveal deception, yet the answers only deepened the mystery. Physicians called to observe her condition confirmed the physical reality of the pregnancy, but could offer no rational explanation for its occurrence at her age and lifestyle. Toledo's citizens, hearing of the church's involvement, speculated further. If the church deemed this authentic, it must be a miracle. If the church doubted, scandal awaited. Inside the convent, tension grew with every passing hour. The nuns were torn between reverence and fear, some leaning toward belief in a divine act, others anxious that suspicion or sin might tarnish their sacred home. Magdalena's presence was both a comfort and a threat. Her calm dignity drew sympathy, yet the inexplicable nature of her condition provoked unease. The abbess attempted to mediate, but even her authority could not quell the subtle unrest that rippled through the cloistered corridors. The inquisitors spent hours documenting observations, noting even minor gestures, whispered conversations, and the atmosphere of the convent. Candlelight flickered across ancient paintings, casting saints' eyes into grotesque angles as if judging every action. Outside, Toledo's streets thrummed with rumor. Debates flared in taverns. Sermons in the cathedral grappled with the possibility of divine mystery, and whispers of scandal threatened the convent's reputation. As dusk fell, the atmosphere inside the convent became suffocating. Every movement, every whispered prayer, every glance carried the weight of scrutiny and expectation. Magdalena paused in the chapel, fingers lightly resting on her rounded belly, understanding that the night would bring new revelations, perhaps answers, or further questions that challenged the boundaries of faith, reason, and human understanding. If you were present as the church interrogated the nun, would you have believed in a miracle or suspected something darker? Share your thoughts in the comments below. As the church investigation continued, Toledo became a city suspended between awe and suspicion. Citizens whispered contradictory accounts of what had occurred within the convent walls. Some claimed that angels had appeared in the chapel, marking Magdalena as a vessel of divine intervention. Others spread darker rumors, claims of secret trysts, hidden visitors, and sins cloaked in devotion. Street corners became stages for debate, and even merchants paused mid-transaction to exchange opinions. Every new detail twisted the narrative, fueling both fascination and fear. Inside the convent, the nuns were caught in a web of uncertainty. Those closest to Magdalena described her behavior as virtuous and unwavering. She prayed at dawn, tended to her duties, and maintained composure even under intense scrutiny. Yet outsiders, newly arrived clerics, magistrates, and witnesses, offered conflicting reports. Some noted her serenity, interpreting it as miraculous. Others questioned subtle gestures, a hesitant glance, or the meticulous care she exhibited, interpreting them as potential concealment. The tension between faith and doubt sharpened to an almost tangible edge, slicing through the cloistered calm the sisters had known for decades. The inquisitors, now joined by physicians and local magistrates, meticulously recorded testimonies from all parties, their notebooks filling with contradictions, observations, and eerie coincidences. Candlelight flickered across the convent's vaulted ceilings, illuminating centuries-old frescoes of saints whose eyes seemed to watch and judge, their gaze reflecting centuries of devotion now disrupted by an impossible event. Every footstep echoed like a drumbeat of suspense, the soft shuffle of robes, the metallic clink of keys, and the faint murmur of whispered prayers forming a tense rhythm that seemed to pulse through the halls. Outside, the city reacted with growing hysteria. The idea of a miraculous pregnancy in a lifelong nun challenged social, moral, and religious norms. Crowds gathered near the convent, hoping for a glimpse, a word, or a sign. The story reached the ears of clergy and nobles alike, who debated whether this was a divine message or an affront to both faith and decency. Toledo was gripped by anticipation, its citizens simultaneously reverent and scandalized, unable to reconcile the impossible with their understanding of the world. As evening descended, Magdalena knelt in the chapel, hands resting over her belly, contemplating the impossible reality. The whispers outside, the judgmental eyes of saints painted on the walls, and the relentless scrutiny of church authorities all pressed upon her. The question lingered, was this truly a miracle or a human story twisted by fear, desire, and disbelief? If you were in Toledo that night, hearing rumors and testimonies from all sides, would you have believed in a miracle or sought hidden explanations? Tell me in the comments below. As days passed, the convent's serene routine fractured under the weight of scrutiny. Sister Magdalena, once a model of quiet devotion, now found every breath measured against the expectations and suspicions of others. The shadows of candlelight seemed to deepen around her, each flicker casting her reflection across the stone floors, a reminder that her body had become a symbol both of reverence and scandal. She prayed, not for forgiveness alone, but for guidance through a reality that defied explanation. Inside the cloistered halls, whispers multiplied. The nuns, though devoted, struggled to reconcile the miraculous with the plausible. Some knelt beside Magdalena in quiet support, placing their hands gently upon her shoulders, murmuring prayers that the miracle might be divine and pure. Others observed with cautious distance, their eyes scanning for inconsistencies, interpreting hesitation or calmness as either virtue or concealment. Even the abbess, whose wisdom had guided generations, seemed uncertain. The convent's walls, steeped in centuries of devotion, now echoed with the tension of impossible knowledge, their silence punctuated by the distant tolling of Toledo's cathedral bells. Beyond the convent, the city's fascination grew unbearable. Merchants, priests, and travelers speculated on every detail, embellishing the story with each retelling. The magistrates who had visited now returned to monitor public sentiment, aware that such an event, miraculous or scandalous, could ignite unrest. Street corners became arenas of debate, taverns hummed with speculation, and sermons from cathedral pulpits attempted to reconcile faith with disbelief. Toledo itself seemed caught between fear and reverence, the impossible pregnancy, transforming the city into a stage for moral and spiritual reflection. Magdalena felt the pressure acutely. Every movement, every prayer, every interaction carried consequences, not only for herself but for the convent and the city. The convent's corridors became both sanctuary and prison. The familiar stone walls now felt oppressive, as if history itself demanded an explanation. She struggled with her own understanding of faith and reality. Was this divine intervention, a punishment, or a biological impossibility masquerading as destiny? Each day blurred into the next, with whispers outside and judgment inside amplifying her isolation. As night fell, she knelt in the chapel, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows across her face. The question pressed relentlessly. If this was a miracle, why did it feel so heavy, so impossible to bear? If you were Sister Magdalena, under the scrutiny of church, city, and conscience, would you have accepted this as divine or questioned everything? Share your answer in the comments below. By the fifth day, the tension surrounding Sister Magdalena had reached a crescendo. Toledo was no longer merely curious. It was gripped by a mixture of awe, fear, and scandal. Citizens gathered near the convent gates, craning their necks for a glimpse of the nun whose condition defied both nature and faith. Inside, the church delegation intensified their investigation, determined to uncover truth, miracle, or deception. Their presence was commanding, robes brushing against ancient floors, the air thick with incense and unspoken judgment. Magdalena, aware of every glance, every whisper, moved with quiet dignity through the corridors. Yet the weight of expectation was almost unbearable. The inquisitors questioned her relentlessly, documenting every action, gesture, and response, as physicians confirmed the pregnancy's undeniable reality. Toledo's population, hearing the reports, oscillated between reverence and suspicion. What divine message could justify this, they wondered? And if no divine explanation existed, what human act had dared transgress centuries of religious vows? The nuns, too, faced their own inner turmoil. Some expressed quiet devotion, interpreting the pregnancy as a miracle. a sign that faith could still touch the seemingly impossible. Others trembled with fear, questioning their own understanding of morality and the sanctity of the convent. The abbess, torn between protecting her sisters and complying with the inquisitors, attempted to mediate, yet even her authority felt insufficient against the gravity of what had occurred. Then came the revelation. A carefully kept medical examination, conducted under the church's supervision, revealed something astonishing. The pregnancy showed unusual markers inconsistent with any known biological patterns. Magdalena's age, her lifelong celibacy, and the absence of any external explanation left the inquisitors, men trained to observe, rationalize, and judge, staggered. The news filtered to Toledo slowly, through whispers first, then hushed conversations on cathedral steps and in taverns. Panic, wonder, and debate surged through the city. Was this truly a miracle, a divine intervention beyond comprehension, or an occurrence science could not yet explain? The convent, once a quiet sanctuary, now felt like the epicenter of a cosmic enigma. Magdalena knelt in the chapel that night, candlelight illuminating her serene yet troubled face. Shadows danced across centuries-old frescoes, as if history itself observed and waited for judgment. If you had witnessed this revelation unfold, would you have believed in divine mystery, or sought a hidden human cause? Tell me in the comments below, how would you have reacted if confronted with the impossible? By the next morning, Toledo was a city transformed. Word of the church's findings had reached every corner. The pregnancy of Sister Magdalena was real, inexplicable, and in defiance of all natural laws. Citizens gathered near the convent and along the city's narrow streets, discussing, debating, and speculating on what had occurred behind the ancient stone walls. Merchants, children, and priests alike whispered of miracles, of sin, and of signs from God. The city's rhythm seemed altered, each conversation heavy with awe and suspicion. Inside the convent, the atmosphere was tense, almost suffocating. The nuns, previously cloistered and insulated from worldly concerns, now found themselves under relentless scrutiny. Some embraced the idea of divine intervention, gathering around Magdalena in quiet reverence, murmuring prayers and offering support. Others were gripped by fear, crossing themselves at every step, convinced that the extraordinary occurrence challenged morality and threatened to taint their sacred home. The abbess moved carefully, mediating between faith and caution, aware that history itself seemed to press upon the convent's walls. The church's delegation, still present, sought to manage public perception while preserving the integrity of the investigation. They published cautious accounts, careful to frame the event as mysterious but unexplainable, a phenomenon perhaps divine in nature, yet beyond ordinary comprehension. Toledo's citizens, however, took the story into their own hands. Rumors grew more vivid and fantastical with each telling. Angels walking the cloisters, whispered messages from God, divine protection, or sinister manipulations hidden behind sanctity. The line between belief and fear blurred, creating an atmosphere thick with tension, awe, and speculation. Magdalena herself became a symbol of paradox, devotion and anomaly, human and potentially divine. She continued her prayers in the chapel, fingers resting lightly on her swollen belly, reflecting on the impossibility of her situation. Each candle flicker seemed to stretch time, each shadow a reminder of the city watching, the church judging, and history recording. She was both protected and scrutinized, revered and questioned, a living enigma that no law, logic, or morality could fully define. As night fell, Toledo's citizens paused along streets, gazing toward the convent, wondering what truth lay behind the heavy doors. Was this a divine miracle, or a human impossibility dressed as devotion? Could anyone reconcile faith with what they had seen? If you had been in Toledo watching history unfold, would you have believed in the miracle or feared it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. How would you have reacted to such an impossible event? In the days that followed, Toledo struggled to comprehend what had occurred within the walls of Santa Maria la Real. Sister Magdalena, once an ordinary nun devoted to prayer and service, had become a figure of fascination, awe, and debate. Pilgrims arrived from neighboring towns, drawn by tales of the impossible, seeking to glimpse the woman whose condition defied nature and faith alike. Candlelit chapels were filled with murmured prayers, offerings, and questions whispered to saints, whose painted eyes seemed to watch over a mystery the city could not explain. The church, after careful deliberation, published an account of the events, framing the pregnancy as inexplicable, but preserving Magdalena's reputation and the sanctity of the convent. While some clergy cautiously endorsed the idea of a divine miracle, others expressed doubt, emphasizing human curiosity and the limits of understanding. Toledo, however, needed no official sanction. The city had already chosen its interpretation. Some citizens spoke of blessing and divine favor, while others muttered suspicions of scandal, long buried beneath devotion. The city's collective consciousness had shifted, caught between reverence and disbelief, awe and moral tension. Inside the convent, Magdalena resumed her duties as best she could, her days now a mixture of normality and scrutiny. The nuns treated her with quiet respect. Though fear and curiosity lingered in the shadows, she herself remained serene, a paradoxical figure, human, vulnerable, and yet somehow untouchable, carrying the extraordinary within her without complaint or exhibition. Each day, as candlelight danced across ancient frescoes and stone floors, she reflected on the impossibility she embodied. The miracle or mystery had changed her, the convent and the city, leaving an indelible mark upon history. Historians would later record the event as one of the most extraordinary episodes in Toledo's history, a story that challenged biology, morality, and the boundaries of faith. Whether considered a divine act or an inexplicable anomaly, it remained a testament to human fascination with the impossible. Travelers recounted it across Spain, priests debated it in hushed tones, and citizens carried the story in their hearts for generations. The convent itself became a symbol of both devotion and enigma, its walls forever echoing with the whispers of history and the weight of a secret that defied comprehension. If you had lived in Toledo during this extraordinary time, witnessing Sister Magdalena's pregnancy and the city's response, would you have believed in the miracle or sought a rational explanation? Tell me in the comments, how would you have reacted if confronted with the impossible?